the second halves of the Broncos are the real concern. The last 3 weeks, their second halves, they've lost 52-8. They haven't scored a try in the second half the last couple of weeks. So there's some real concern there for the Broncos.
Welcome to another edition of the Billy Slater Podcast. We do it all thanks to Tab. How are you, Billy?
I'm well, thanks, Salty. I don't think I've seen a round of footy like this one that we've just had, round 10 of the NRL in 2025. The amount of comebacks, teams that look dead and gone at half-time, have come back and won the game. And then there was a couple of teams that come back and levelled the score and didn't go on with the job. But I don't know if I've seen a round of footy like it. It was incredible.
It sure was. Game you were at yesterday at Four Pines Brookvale. Thought, here we go again, another comeback. Cronulla led 14-0, got back to 14-all Manly, but then the Sharks did well in the end. What was your takeaway of this one, particularly, I suppose, first up from a Sharks point of view, being able to get over the line in a game like that?
Yeah, that was one of the games I was talking about. It looked all Sharks in the first half, and 14-0 was it was probably looking like that favoured the Manly Seagulls. They were totally outplayed in that first half. I thought the Sharks were very dominant. They used the football well, showed some class to get some points on the board. Manly just weren't there. They've had a lot go on in the early parts of this year. Obviously, the Daly Cherry Evans saga, and then also they've had a bit of travel. They've gone over to New Zealand, they've gone to Perth, they've played several games in short periods of time, and then they had a bye. That gave them a chance to exhale, and they just didn't jump out of the gates like they have at some stages of this year. And Tom Trbojevic back, we thought that, as soon as he comes back in, they're a different side. But yeah, it was all Sharkies, and they did come back in the second half, the Manly Seagulls, but the Sharks were a much better team on the day and definitely deserved to win.
The Sharks, in getting a win like that away from home, they have had success there at 4 Points in recent past, but they're just starting to tick a few boxes, do you find, this year? I mean, they're a quality outfit, we know that.
Yeah, I think they've been ticking boxes for the last couple of years. I think they're a quality side, they're a good side. They're not a great side just yet, and that's their next challenge is to go from good to great. To do that, you've got to do it in the big games, and they don't get the opportunity to do that until September. But week after week is practice for that, and that's what Craig Fitzgibbon and the coaching staff and the playing group would be looking at. They'll be looking at putting consistency together, and they're a good team. They're a hard team to beat. They're very well balanced across the board, and when their halves are connecting and they're playing well, they're a really dangerous football team. I think Nicho Hynes in some great form. He looks like he's right on top of his game. He's really confident with his skills, and they're going along nicely. The fullback's playing well too, Salty.
Isn't he what? I think
he's leading the Dally M count at the minute, Yeah,
he is, Will Kennedy, so going along really well. Probably that game over in Perth, where he scored, I think we spoke about it, one of the greatest non-tries ever. From then on, he just hasn't looked back the last 5 weeks.
Well, that was up against this exact same team. They only played Manly 4 weeks ago, so there was a little bit of niggle in the game as well. And I asked Nicho Hynes after the game on Channel 9, was there a bit of feeling because you've played so recent? And he said, yeah, probably. When you play against sides and the other side wants to get over you because you won, they lost the game the time before, and it's a bit interesting that they only played 4 weeks ago and they've already doubled up and played again. So that was a good game for Will Kennedy. He was brilliant. One of them was taken off him, but then he scored a very similar try straight after it.
Mate, we could do a whole podcast one day on just trying to examine the draw, how some teams wait 24 rounds to play each other, and then others play each other twice in a month. Leave me out of it. I don't want to work it out.
Yeah, no, it'd be difficult, wouldn't it? Travel, turnarounds, trying to keep everyone happy. Well, the one thing in life that was soon realising is that you can't make everyone happy, and you can't be in everyone's good books. So you've just got to take it as it is and play what's in front of you.
Mate, the other game on Sunday, well, actually, before we get to that, I want to ask you about Manly and where you see them at the moment. Another team that is just absolutely chock full of talent, had a fair bit going on, as well as you've alluded to. But where to now for the Seagulls?
Well, they've got to search for their best footy, because their best footy is good enough. We've seen that at times this year, and mainly through the early part of the season, that first month. But they're in a little bit of a rut at the moment. They would have got away from footy over the last 2 weeks to freshen up, but sometimes that can put you back in the seat, and you just start that little bit relaxed. So I thought they were going to start really fast, but I was wrong. And Manly just need to find their best footy, because when they do, they're a really dangerous footy team.
All right, 7 days can be very long for a team, and I dare say it can be very long when you arguably throw a game away, like the Melbourne Storm did against the Canberra Raiders, and the players came out as if they've had a big week, and they responded to the coach, didn't they, in spades, the Melbourne Storm. And, well, I don't think it mattered who they were up against, but it was the West Tigers who were their victims yesterday.
Yeah, I think they responded to the disappointment as well. You don't need your coach to, spray you in a team meeting to realise how disappointing that loss was last week against Canberra, and it was a real statement game. I think most experts have got Melbourne in their probably top two to play out in the grand final at the end of the year, and they showed why. I think they're a great side, and if they get it right at the right time of the year, they're going to be hard to beat. It was, a real statement. I thought their fullback was great. Obviously, he scored the first 3 tries of the day and was in everything, but he gets to play well when the team plays well. We all know the story behind Ryan Papenhuyzen. He played his 100th game last week against the Canberra Raiders, and it's been a real journey for him to get there, and he's a wonderful player. I get the opportunity to see how hard he works firsthand at the Melbourne Storm throughout the week, and he's a great guy, and he's been rewarded for a whole heap of persistence, but a whole heap of resilience as well. And he sees the game as good as any, and he sources out those opportunities, and he's got the skills and ability to back that up. But the Melbourne Storm just put the competition on notice, didn't they?
Sure did. I love the way too, Billy, a lot of their more unheralded players respond, and that's not the first time after a disappointing performance. We saw it happen after the loss to the Dragons, and they immediately come out and have a big win, and then this week they've done it as well. And those with the lesser profile come out and respond as well. And Trent Loiero, I suppose, is one who. He would have been unhappy personally with his game against Canberra, but, oh boy, he was on point from pretty much the opening kickoff yesterday. Yeah,
and they're the players that they get celebrated internally at the Melbourne Storm. I know that, because without the unheralded, the no-frills type of players in a footy team, the Ryan Papenhuysens don't get the rewards. They don't get the space. They don't get the ability to showcase their talent, and that's certainly rewarded. I think Josh King's another one. Blore and Katoa are doing a great job on the edges. So, there's a lot of work that goes on in the middle of the field to allow the class to shine. And, Trent would have been really disappointed with, a couple of the incidences against Canberra. And he loves his footy. He cares about his footy team, and he works really hard. That's why he's got his footy to this sort of standard. And for him to come out and play the way he did. Sometimes, we all think about people making mistakes and we need to change those people. Well, they're actually the people that are most probably not going to make those mistakes again, because they've been through that experience, and he will be better from the experience over the last fortnight, and it just refocuses you. You talk about when they go down to the Dragons and they bounce back the week after, they go down to Canberra, they bounce back the week after. Sometimes this season gets away from you. It's quite a long season, and subconsciously your focus drifts. There's nothing like a disappointing loss just to refocus your mind and bring you back to where you need to be.
Mate, I know we'll look ahead to this upcoming round in a few moments, but we should touch on it now, considering we've just spoken about two of the teams. Sharks play Storm this week. That's it's a great test for the Sharks to see where they're at, and it probably follows on from the point you made right at the start of the podcast when describing the Sharks.
That's going to be a belter Saturday night, and we did have Nico Hines on the desk after the game, and he was aware, or we did make him aware of the scoreline of the Melbourne Storm. And the first thing he said was Melbourne don't like coming to Cronulla. So already thinking ahead, the players, and they'll know the form of the two sides. And this will be one of those tests. This will be one of those tests for the Sharks to go from good to great. They're coming up against probably the benchmark of the competition. And all eyes will be on the Sharks, and all eyes will be on the Melbourne Storm in this game. Definitely.
Saturday afternoon, wasn't it a great sight? Canberra and the Bulldogs, a sellout in the nation's capital. And the other thing too with that one is that, a lot of Canberra fans got out and about, but a lot of Bulldogs supporters made the trip down the highway to support their team. And what a game of football is. One of the comebacks we'll talk about.
Yeah, why wouldn't you? When your team's sitting on top of the ladder, and they're the only team that have won 8 games this season, only lost 1, I think. So it's been a great run from the Bulldogs, and there's no luck to where they're sitting. Is it the first time in 30 years that GIO Stadium's been sold out in a home and away game? That is a great achievement. So not just for the Bulldogs, but for Canberra. Canberra are doing wonderfully well, and their supporters are certainly a reflection of that. Turning up, going out and watching their game. I think Ricky Stewart's been pretty vocal about a new stadium down in Canberra, for their supporters. So, whilst you're turning up and you're filling up your stadium, well, that's a great push for getting a new one. It was all Canberra. This was one of those really weird games where it was 20-0 at halftime, Canberra's way. Canberra looked like they were the best team in the competition. They were just going to steamroll the Bulldogs in the second half. But I'm going to talk about 4 signings that Gus Goulds made over the last few years. The first one is their coach, and he's obviously given a 5-star halftime, I won't say spray, but delivery.
Address. Yep.
And the other 3 of their 3-star players, Viliami Kikau, he stood up right at the end of the game. Matt Burton, he was another one that I felt stood up in that second half. And we all know their captain, Stephen Crichton, there was a 10-minute period after halftime that he really got, not just got them back in the game on the scoreboard, but he got their belief up. That's the one thing that he got up. He got the team's belief up and said, hey, we can do this. And then everyone else just followed. It was a wonderful performance by the Bulldogs, and one that they'll look back on, and it could be they're already, 8 wins and 1 loss, but it could be a real turning point in their season in terms of that belief. So, a great performance. It lived up to all expectations this game.
Certainly did. Wonderful game of football. Outstanding. Let's get on to a few of the comebacks as well. We're talking about that one. The one early game on Friday night when it looked like the Gold Coast Titans, and there's already been whispers about Dez's future, and they're 20-0 down away to Newcastle, and bang, come out and play exceptional football in the second half.
Well, if there was whispers before the game, could you imagine what they were at halftime? 20-0 down. It was actually the comeback night. Friday night was comeback night because it happened in the other game. And then the Bulldogs-Canberra game was the very next game on Saturday afternoon. So who'd be a coach? Wow. 20-0 down, and then they come back and win. The Titans have had a really tough start to the year. A lot of pressure on them. And, that'll be talk about turning points. They could really bounce off that. Tino Fa'asuamaleaui played in his 100th game. That was a big moment for him, and, the team responded to that halftime. So, whatever Des said to him at halftime, it's obviously worked.
Yeah, well done to them on being able to get that win. Jaden Campbell, him coming back into the team as well too. Billy, and they're starting to get a few players back. So, they've got talent, don't they, the Titans?
Yeah, and young De Groot, he had a couple of good moments in that comeback as well. But you're right, when your class comes back into the side, it just settles everyone. We've even seen with the Eels, on the Thursday night game against the Dolphins. I think they're on the right path. They're not far off at all, and the difference that Mitchell Moses makes in that footy team, just gives them a whole heap of direction and belief, and that's what your good players do. I think Keanu Kinney's still missing out of that Titans team. I think when he comes back, I know he's got a lengthy neck injury, but when he comes back, he'll be another one. But a win just settles everything and allows you to focus on your footy and take a breath.
Well, just looking at the ladder as you were talking there, I mean, this competition that we've got at the moment, 4 wins, leaving the buys aside, 4 wins has you inside the 8. 3 wins has you 16th. It's so fine margins, isn't it? We're going to be talking about teams flying and inside the top 8, and then the next minute they could be on the slide. And those sides that are around where the Panthers, Titans, Dragons, Knights are, Dolphins as well in 12th, and they haven't had a bye yet. The Dolphins, they've had 4 wins for the season so far. I mean, it's just so tight. 2 wins and you can fire up the ladder.
Yeah, there's a couple of teams, there's 3 teams inside the 8 that are yet to have a bye. The Raiders, the Sharks, and the Broncos. And the other thing that you can look at, if your team's sitting just outside the 8, it's not all that bad, because you've got the Tigers and the Rabbitohs who have won 5 games each. They're sitting in 10th and 11th spot. But Manly have only won 4 games and they're sitting in 8th position. So it's a little bit hard to read in terms of how many wins you've had because of those buys and when you get those buys, because those teams that haven't had those buys yet, they still have an opportunity to win those games, and if they do, they'll leapfrog those other teams. So it'll all even itself out, but it is so tight. It's such a tight competition that you chalk up victories at this time of the year and you might forget about them in 3 months' time when you're pushing into a finals, but they all count. And there was a draw this week, which would that's going to make that ladder really interesting, with the Cowboys and the Panthers just picking up 1 point each. That takes the for and against out of it. So all of a sudden, that could be the difference of making finals or missing out.
Yeah, you love having 1 or 2 draws during the season for that exact reason. We just spoke about the early game on Friday night and the comeback. Well, let's talk about what happened at Accor Stadium. The Broncos were cruising, Billy, and then they led 14-0 in the first half. There's been a lot of talk about a midweek cruise. Anyway, that's what the Broncos decided to do. But then it just looked as though it was going to be a comfortable night out for Brisbane, but then enter Latrell Mitchell.
There's a few storylines to this game, Salty. I think the first one was Latrell Mitchell. He came up with some really big moments, and we'll get to the field goal in a minute, but I thought defensively there was a couple of big plays from Latrell. Payne Haas broke the line in the first half, and he cut him down in a bootlace tackle. That was a brilliant play. Like, we all know how hard Payne Haas is to bring down. And then there was a couple of plays in the second half where he put his body on the line. Selwyn Cobbo was going for the ball right on the try line, and he got right in front of him. That was a big play, and another play in the corner. So I think defensively he was on, and then he came up with those big moments towards the end of the game. None more bigger than the field goal, 50 metres or 49 metres it was, and he just went whack, and he hit it so sweet. And it was the moment after it when he just turned around and just walked back to position. He was emotionless, and it was a real moment in the game. And Wayne Bennett, if there was ever a team that Wayne was going to get his footy team up for, it was going to be the Broncos. And I suppose the other storyline, Salty, is the Brisbane Broncos. And look, you always look back at history and the results and the form. The second halves of the Broncos are the real concern. We all know the brilliance that the Broncos have and can play with. But the last 3 weeks, their second halves, they've lost 52-8. So how they're coming out of the halftime chat, how they're coming out to the second half is certainly not to the standard that they're playing the first half with. They were brilliant against the Bulldogs a few weeks ago in the first half, like I think it was 32-0. And then the second half, they actually lost the second half. I think it was 18-4 or 18-0 or something like that. And then they haven't scored a try in the second half the last couple of weeks. So there's some real concern there for the Broncos. Is it panic? No, it's definitely not panic stations. They've got too much quality. They've got the issue with Ben Hunt now. Obviously, Ben Hunt's going to be out for a period of time. Does Ezra Mam come straight back in? So I think that's timely. And, there's a bit of work to be done there.
Is it fair to say that, you mentioned Ezra Mam, Reece Walsh will be a few weeks away, that in the last couple of years they've played their best football when Ezra and Reece are there together with Renault as well? It's obviously, as you said, a concern for Ben Hunt. We'll talk about him in just a moment. I think Ben himself realised that once Ezra came back, he was due to play 9 in the team, that you judge Brisbane on when you see those key players back in their positions? Yeah.
Look, I think there's two ways to look at this. There's no doubt that Ezra Mam and Reece Walsh make the Broncos a better side, and it just helps with the balance. And but at the same time, I'm sure they're looking at themselves and thinking, okay, well, have a look at the players that we did have Friday night, and did we play to our standard? Did we play good enough? Well, they would probably say no. Harry Grant's missing out of the Melbourne Storm, and they seem to be able to cope with that. So, you just have to look at what's in front of you. You can't just think, okay, we're getting a couple of big names back, we'll wait for them and then we'll start playing well. Well, you got to look at your standard of your footy and think, well, did we play to our standard or didn't we play to our standard? And at the moment, I don't think the Broncos would put their hand up and say they're playing to the standard of that footy club.
Billy, on Ben Hunt, obviously he would have been in the mix to play Origin because he's always played so well for Queensland in the past. So it's not only a blow for Brisbane, but also for you. I know you've got cover and you focus now on who is available, but it is bad luck for Ben.
I always feel for the players because I know how much they put into it, and it's not just the commitment for 80 minutes on a weekend. It's the 3 or 4 months that they go through pre-season training. It's the every day they get home from training, they're doing recovery, they're making sure they're eating right. They're all in. This is their life, and that's why it's disappointing when you see players get long-term injuries. And the other thing that's important is you have to wait until all the players have played their footy. You get the health checks done on them, and you see what the best formula for that footy team is, and that's just another example of why you've got to wait till this Sunday night. It's only 6 days away. We're not that far away from announcing that first State of Origin team for Queensland, and it's just disappointing for the players that they won't be in on that table, putting their hand up for selection, the ones that are injured anyway.
So true. You cannot afford to, and we've spoken about it, on here and privately as well. You can't afford to. Obviously got an idea of who's going to be there, but you can't write the team out in pen, can you? Until after every player has finished playing. Maybe just jot a few players' names down in pencil, because so much can change quickly as well. Yeah,
I think that's the big part of my role prior to the first camp is putting in the time and watching not just 25 Queenslanders, watching every Queenslander that's playing in the NRL, watching their game and watching their habits and having contingency plans and all this sort of stuff. So, that's something that I make sure that I respect my position by doing. And things will happen, and things probably happen this weekend. So you've just got to, take a breath, relax, and watch footy intently, and make sure you know where all the Queenslanders are at. And then when we get to Sunday night, we build the best possible team for our Queensland people, and we go out and get after it.
And the players know that too, Billy. I know you've made it known as well that you're just watching and so forth. Whether it be the Rob Toys of the world, the Isaiah Tasses of the world, players that people probably don't even realise are Queensland eligible.
Yeah, exactly. The first thing I do every year is make sure I get an updated eligibility list of all our Queenslanders, and I'm aware of all of that. And when the young fella comes into the system of the NRL, the Jackson Purdues and all these young players, they're young Queenslanders, and it's important to acknowledge that and understand that. So that's a part of the role, and a part of it doing it justice.
All right, well, that's more of a conversation now for next week when the team is out and about for Origin. We will have a Billy Slater podcast next week, just as you're going into camp. Mate, one of the other Queensland teams, I really enjoyed this game on Thursday night, and it was the Dolphins getting a gritty win over the Eels. High-quality game of football, and boy, spoke to Christian Wolf on Wide World of Sports radio show on 4BC on Friday night, and he was particularly praising the scramble of the defence just turning up for each other throughout the 80 minutes.
And they needed to. They needed to scramble because the Eels are doing a lot right. Although they're sitting at the wrong end of the table, they can take so much positivity out of their performances at the moment. There was a moment late in the game, and it actually put them right in the finish, and it come from two of their young fellas. It was Kartonga on the left-hand side, and Isaiah, what's his last name? Iongi, sorry.
Yeah,
Isaiah Iongi, who is a young Queenslander, speaking of Queenslanders. They came up with a brilliant moment on the left-hand side. It was an offload to Iongi from Kartonga, sorry. And that was the green shoots coming through. And they're fighting really hard. They were right in this contest, and the Dolphins played well. It was a couple of moments from some real stars at the back end of the game. Herbie Farnworth was one who broke the line and just ran around the fullback and scored a brilliant try. Like that was typical Herbie style. And then the hammer, the last play of the game. Again, they broke that line. I think it was that play, and then Dylan Brown turned hammer inside out, and I thought he was in the corner, and then the hammer just, within a couple of strides, just picked him up. It just shows you what speed can do in our game, not just with the footy, but defensively, and that was a great finish. But Jason Ryles can be really proud of his team. Although they didn't pick up the 2 points, they're on the right track, and Christian Wolf will certainly be happy to get back in that winner's circle.
Absolutely. Mate, you made mention of the draw that we had on Saturday night. We nearly had two of them. The Warriors with the field goal, getting the win over the Dragons in a really tight, tough contest down in Wollongong. And then the 30-all draw between the Cowboys and the Panthers. It was interesting hearing the reaction of both coaches after the game, talking about different things that went against their sides. And I'm sure that the review would have been interesting because do you think for both of them, both Todd Payton and Ivan Cleary, it would have been 1 point that got away?
Yeah, I think so. When you lose, we don't lose when we're so close to picking up the 2 points. You're always looking at the little things and the little decisions that go against you. But at the end of the day, the Cowboys fought hard. They had to reduce two 12-point deficits in this game. And they did that. I felt the Panthers picked up from where they left off the week before in Magic Round. I thought they played really well, and they had the Cowboys off the bit, and the Cowboys had to fight back and claw back into this game. There was a moment towards the end of the game that really got me off my couch, and that was Scott Drinkwater breaking the line, and then Tommy Dearden just scoring under the post to square it all up at 30-all. That was a real moment. So. It was a wonderful game. They couldn't get it done in Golden Point. It just added to the theatre of the NRL in round 10, and I thought it was a brilliant game to watch.
Yeah, absolutely outstanding. All right, this is the Billy Slater Podcast, and we do it each and every week thanks to Tab.
Fans always ask, Loza, what was the best era of league? And I tell them, nothing beats the line-breaking, flick-passing, goose-stepping, bankers-flying, turbo-try-scoring, origin drought-breaking, simply the best era of footy we're in right now. And with more market stats and insights, it's easy to enjoy the best era in footy with the best app in footy.
Tab. We're on.
What's gambling really costing you? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
Billy M medal time on the Billy Slater Podcast, thanks to Tab. All right, Billy, which team is your team of the week for the Billy M medals? Is it one of the comeback kids, if we want to call them, or which one stood out for you?
Well, I've got to go the complete performance. There were so many brilliant team performances in terms of comeback and storylines and that sort of stuff, but how can you go past the complete performance of the Melbourne Storm, 64-0? They were the team that actually got out to a lead and just said at halftime, we're going to buck the trend. We're not going to be one of these teams in the NRL that give away this lead and just cruise to the line. So yeah, they were outstanding. I called the game in Sydney, the Sharks Manly game, and I had to watch the Storm game on my phone. But yeah, I couldn't have been more proud of the boys. They were great.
All right, so they get your team of the week. A lot of individuals putting their hand up for Billy M individual player of the week. Who takes it out?
There were, but none more than the fullback for the Melbourne Storm, and that's Ryan Pappenhausen. I thought he was the player of the week, and the way he started, he got a hat-trick in the first 16 minutes and scored another one. I think he picked up 36 points throughout the whole game. That's a club record. But yeah, it was great to see him play in that sort of fashion through what he's been through, and he's right on top of his game at the minute.
He certainly is. I know we say it all the time, aren't we blessed with some great fullbacks in our game? You'd probably be one of those, Billy, that says, we don't need the other 12 players on the field, just have a one-on-one with all the fullbacks. They're so good.
Well, not many of us like tackling, so we need the other 12. Don't worry about that.
Fair enough. All right, that is the Billy M. Thanks to Tab. The NRL season is here for the best time in sport. Tab has the best app in sport. Tab, we're on.
Chances are you're about to lose. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.
All right, let's get into listener questions. And Matt sends through one. He says, as I read it here, says, hi, Billy, do you think there should be more players going on loan to other clubs? With the likelihood of DCE going to the Roosters, wouldn't it be better for someone like Hugo Savala to go on loan to another team than to sit in reserve grade? We saw this in effect a few years ago, didn't we, with Harry Grant going to the West Tigers? And, well, what do you think about it?
Yeah, that was because Cameron Smith wouldn't retire.
Yeah.
Look, I don't mind it, but the other thing is, like if they're playing first grade, surely they're in your plans and you've got to persist with them. So, look, I don't mind the player going on loan if he's stuck in reserve grade, but he's a pure NRL player. He's ready to play NRL. But at the same time, I think you need to look to manage your salary cap and you need to look to manage your squad. If you're over capitalising or over committing to a certain position, then I think that's just the disadvantage of management. So there are situations where I think it will benefit both parties, and I think it's got to benefit both parties. But you're only an injury or two away from regretting that decision as well. So you've got to be careful.
All right, good question. Thank you, Matt. This one from Toby. Thoughts on the Panthers trainer spraying the ball with water? Fair game or not on? This was Shane Elford on Saturday night.
I had to look this up, actually. I didn't actually see it. There's two ways to look at this. The first way is it's pretty cheeky. It's a cheeky thing to do. I don't know whether it's outside the rules or inside the rules, and you've only got to play to the rules. And the other thing is the Panthers. If you've watched the Panthers closely, there's so many things that the Panthers started doing over the last 5 years that every club are doing now. So they're leaders in trying to find an edge. Is this too far? That's a question mark. It's outside the game. But they're trying to find an edge. They're trying to, be that little bit better than the opposition and make it harder for the opposition. So, certainly a little bit cheeky. But look, I can have a laugh. I think the NRL will probably give a warning and say, don't do that again. It's a little bit like a player throwing a boot away. It's a little bit like that. It's just making it harder for the opposition, and that's what the game's about. So I can understand it. I don't look at it, as in probably as harshly as some other people, a warning will be sufficient.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Toby, for that one. Send through your listener questions email at billyslaterpodcast at 9.com.au. So billyslaterpodcast at 9.com.au. Big week coming up this week for a number of teams. Obviously, the week of footy gets underway, Billy, on Thursday night, Women's State of Origin 2 from Allianz Stadium, exclusive live and free on 9. Anyone listening in and around Sydney, get along because this will be a great spectacle.
Absolutely, and New South Wales are yet to win a series of 3 games, so they get an opportunity to wrap the series up, but they also had that opportunity last year as well, and the Queenslanders won the final 2. So look, it's going to be interesting. It was a cracking first game up there prior to Magic Round, and one team's got to regroup and try and find their best footy and outdo the opposition. And New South Wales, they've got that opportunity to wrap the series up. So it's going to be a belter.
Certainly will be. We've got a really interesting game, Friday night football on 9 with the Bulldogs taking on the Roosters this week. This is a big game. Looking forward to it.
That could be a big crowd too at Accor Stadium. There's always been a huge rivalry. I remember back in the early 2000s, the Roosters and the Bulldogs, they were real powerhouses of the competition when I first come into play in the NRL. They were 2 of the leading teams, and this is going to be a really good game. Now, the Roosters are going along nicely as well. They're doing plenty right. I think their fullback's playing great. So, the Bulldogs are hard to beat. This is going to be a beauty.
And our Sunday game on 9 features Canberra up against the Gold Coast Titans. Titans coming off a win. It's usually a tough trip, but they'll appreciate the fact it's a day game down in Canberra, I'm sure.
Yeah, and you can expect it to be a full house again. Canberra, they filled GIO Stadium last week, and I'm sure they'll go close to doing it again this week. And if that weather's good, both teams can use the football. They do it in a different way. The Titans, they've got to contain these big, strong outside backs, athletic, and their forwards are really physical as well. And they got the skill in their team to put some points on the board. So looking forward to this one.
Yeah, it should be a beauty. Big round coming up. The last full round before Origin teams are picked and going to camp. So that means, Billy, you and I will chat from Suncorp Stadium next week because we'll be recording this podcast as we do each and every Monday on day 1 of camp for you for Queensland. Boy, it's come around quick. Yeah,
we might sit in the grandstand and have Suncorp Stadium, the old Lang Park, and just have a little chat about the selections and what's going to happen throughout the week. So I look forward to it. It's a big week. Pretty excited and looking forward to getting in there.
Good stuff, Billy. We'll chat next week. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Salty.
Thanks, Billy. I'm Peter Psaltis. That's Billy Slater. This has been the Billy Slater Podcast. We record it each and every Monday, all thanks to Tab.